Bueno, la quinta lectura, la quinceava lectura que voy a escoger se llama Cooking the Books, Recipes and Cost of Falsified Financial Statements in China. Bueno, entonces Cooking the Books es como cuando se maquillan los estados financieros, ¿cierto? Eso significa. Entonces, bueno, recipes es recetas, pero no sé, tal vez quieres en relación a maquillar los libros y los costos de como de los statements es como los estados financieros, el costo de los estados financieros falsificados en China. Bueno. Abstract. We examine the causes and consequences of falsified financial statements in China using bivariate probit regression analysis. We find that firms with high debt and that plan to make equity issues are more likely to manipulate their earnings and thus to have to restate their financial reports in subsequent years. We also find that corporate governance structures have an effect on the occurrence and detection of financial fraud. There are significant negative consequences to fraudulent financial statements. Restating firms suffer negative abnormal tax returns, increases in their cost of capital with ask spreads, and greater frequency of modified audit opinions and greater CEO turnover. We also find that firms located in highly developed regions suffer more severe consequences when they manipulate their accounts. Introduction. High-quality financial information is a necessary condition for an efficient and vibrant stock market. However, trying to measure quality is a challenging task for researchers. The quality of financial statements is often examined with reference to earnings management or earnings quality. However, the measurement of earnings management and earnings quality as done in accounting studies does not provide direct evidence that managers have manipulated earnings. In contrast, a financial statement is often a direct admission by managers of false accounting and financial misrepresentation. Restatements represent corrections to previously issued financial statements, and these corrections usually occur because of accounting manipulation in prior years. Thus, the restatements are prima facie evidence of low-quality financial information disclosures in prior periods. We examine financial statements made by listed firms in China. In particular, we investigate the characteristics of firms that make statements in order to understand why they occur. We then examine the consequences of restatements. While there are several research studies on restatements, they mainly use US data and many of them relate to violations of accounting principles. In contrast, we investigate falsified accounts rather than technical violations of accounting standards or unintentional errors of omission. The deliberate falsification of the accounts is a type of financial fraud. Given the different historical, legal, and institutional backgrounds between China and the US, we should not automatically impute or generalize the findings from the latter to the former. Nevertheless, there are some similarities between the two countries, not least of which is China's willingness to adopt or modify the best governance practices from the developed countries, and this allows us to use the US studies as a point of reference in our research. In addition to examining financial statement misrepresentation in a different market setting, we also extend the literature in two other important ways. First, we use a two-stage procedure that examines the propensity to falsify the accounts and the reason for its subsequent discovery and disclosure. This methodological advance is important. It allows us to gain a better understanding of the forces behind financial restatements. Second, we recognize that there are substantial differences in economic and market development across the different regions of China, and this can have a profound effect on our results. We therefore incorporate these regional differences into our research design. Restatements of the financial accounts are the result of a multi-stage process. The first stage is the decision to falsify the statements and therefore commit financial fraud. Subsequent stages include the discovery of the false accounting and the reporting of it in a restatement. However, most prior studies use a basic probit or logic model of restatements and do not differentiate between the different stages, leading to the revelation of financial fraud. One innovation of our study is that we use a two-stage process where we model the propensity to commit accounting fraud, and in the second stage model the reporting of the fraud in a subsequent period to identify the characteristics of and the motivation behind the propensity to falsify the financial statements and its subsequent disclosure. We use the bivariate probit regression with partial observability technique. This approach allows us to overcome the problem of distinguishing between the motives to manipulate the financial statements and the subsequent detection and reporting of the falsified accounts. Recent research has focused on institutional factors to explain earnings quality and differences in quality across countries. Institutional factors include the prevailing economic conditions, the governance of firms, institutional and regulatory frameworks, and the legal environment. One little understood characteristic of China's reforms is the very uneven distribution of economic and legal development across the country. Natural resources and human capital resources account for some of the regional differences in development, but political connections with the country's leadership elite are also very important. Great variations in regional per capita income and education levels are one manifestation of the vast differences in development across the country. We argue that the differences in regional development have significant effects on the incidence of and consequences of falsified accounts. In particular, we believed financial statement quality is higher for those firms located in developed providence, and consequently investors rely heavily on financial statements in their decision making. This implies that the market will react strongly to the financial restatements of firms located in well-developed regions, but there will be a much more muted response in poorly developed regions, as investors have already discounted the low quality of financial reports. To test our beliefs, we explicitly account for market development using a set of indexes designed to capture differences in economy, political, legal, and institutional factors across regions. The advantage of conducting interregional studies within one country is that we can capture the effect of institutions on the quality of financial information free of contamination due to country difference in reporting and disclosure rules, taxation, and bankruptcy laws. China has now emerged from the embryonic stage of capitalism and become a major economic power with significant inward investment from other parts of the world. Portfolio investment from the US and elsewhere in accelerating as international investors search for high-growth markets with substantial domestic demand. One impediment to this growth, however, is investors' lack of knowledge about China's capital markets environment and the quality of financial information. These concerns are real, as high-quality financial information is a major factor in assuring the supply of inward international investment. Our study is therefore important as it yields key insights into the quality of financial information by making an in-depth study of the causes of consequences of falsified accounts. We established reasons that led firms to manipulate their financial statements, and we examined whether there are safeguards of governance features that helps reduce the accounting fraud from taking place. We also investigate the influences that led to the detection and disclosure of the false accounting. We provide a comprehensive examination of the consequences of restatements, and this contrasts with prior research studies which tend to focus on one or two consequences at a time while ignoring others. Examining market consequences is important, as an absence of them may imply that investors ignore financial information altogether. We identify 813 restatements in the period 2000 to 2005. Of these cases, 542 relate to the corrections of non-financial information, and we do not consider this any further in our study. The remaining 271 cases involves corrections to the income statement and the balance sheet. On average, about 3.7% of listed firms restate their financial numbers each year. We find evidence that firms are more likely to manipulate their financial statements if they make equity issues, are highly leveraged, are controlled by the central government, and are located in less developed regions. This proclivity to restate is tempered. However, if a firm has a high percentage of directors with financial expertise, given that false accounting has occurred, disclosures of it through the medium of restatements is more likely when the board is independent and the firm is non-government controlled and located in a more developed region. The restatements have important consequences for firms. First, there is a significant negative stock return when accounting fraud is announced. Second, the restating firm's cost of capital increases and its bid-ask spread widens. Third, firms that are forced to restate their accounts find it harder to sell more shares after the restatement. Thus, capital markets extract a cost from firms that engage in false accounting. Fourth, there is increased uncertainty about the veracity of future financial statements, which is manifested by an increase in the proportion of modified audit opinions. Fifth, top management turnover increases, implying there are costs to managers as well as to the stockholders. In general, these consequences are much more pronounced for firms located in better developed provinces. Investors expect high-quality financial statements in the better development provinces, and so when firms are forced to restate their earnings, the market punishes them severely. We organize the remainder of the paper as follows. The next section briefly reviews China's economic reforms, regional development, and the rules regarding restatements. Section 3 discusses the research, design, and the sample. The characteristics of the restating firms as discussed in Section 4, and the consequences of restatements are described in Section 5. Conclusions are presented in the last section. Bueno, hasta aquí quedó el artículo también porque pues el tiempo es muy corto. Entonces más o menos voy a echarle una ojeadita nuevamente a lo que dice y a mirar lo que entendí. Bueno, aquí releyendo más o menos entendí que dice que se van a examinar las causas y las consecuencias de la falsificación de estados financieros en China. usando como el análisis de regresión bivariate probit, eso como que es algo propio, así se llama. Se encuentra que las empresas con deudas más altas y que planean pues como hacer una emisión de acciones, son más propensas a manipular las ganancias y a volver como a declarar los reportes financieros en los años pues siguientes. También se encuentra que las estructuras de gobierno corporativo tienen un efecto en la ocurrencia de la detección del fraude financiero. Dice pues que los estados financieros fraudulentos tienen consecuencias negativas significativas. Eh, Como las firmas restating es como, espérenme, bueno, sé como que las firmas replanteadas, pero no entiendo como exactamente el punto de lo que quieren decir. Bueno, en fin, que sufren como las como los retornos anormales negativos de las acciones, incrementan su costo de capital, eh, se vuelve más amplia, como la express es como, esperen, sí, se vuelve más amplia la difusión de oferta y demanda, eh, y tiene mayor frecuencia de modificaciones de las opiniones pues como de los que auditan, y mayor rotación del CEO, ¿cierto? También se encuentra que las firmas o las empresas que están localizadas en regiones altamente desarrolladas sufren más, pues consecuencias mucho más severas cuando manipulan sus estados financieros. Entonces de eso se trata la lectura. Dice que pues todo es en relación a cuáles son las consecuencias de manipular los estados financieros en las empresas. A ver qué dice por aquí un pedacito y ya dejamos así por el tiempo. A ver, dice como que la información financiera altamente calificada es una condición necesaria para eh, un, un mercado de acciones eficiente y vibrante. Sin embargo, se trata de una medida de calidad que es una tarea riesgosa para los investigadores, o es un reto para los investigadores. La calidad de los estados financieros frecuentemente es examinada con referencia a las ganancias, como a la gestión de las ganancias o al control de las ganancias o a la calidad de las ganancias. Sin embargo, la medida de la gestión de las ganancias y la calidad de las ganancias eh, se hace como en cuentas, en estudios en cuentas que se estudian, que no proveen evidencia directa de que los administradores han manipulado las ganancias. Entonces dice que como que al contrario, los, bueno, restatement, no sé si se refiere, bueno, es como la revisión, según encontré, como una revisión financiera, es frecuentemente una admisión directa por los managers o los administradores de las cuentas falsas y no sé, será falta de representación financiera, algo así. Bueno, en fin, el artículo apunta pues las consecuencias de hacer maquillaje de los libros contables, ¿cierto? Eso es todo.